I'm Brice Futch,
I'm Spencer Amaral.
and this is The Way Forward. Welcome back to The Way Forward podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brice Futch, here with the indefatigable Spencer Amaral, Father Spencer Amaral. We're going to highlight the father aspect today. Recently, at the time of this recording, it was yesterday, but for all of you out there, it'll be a few days hence. We are going to talk about St. Patrick's Day and who St. Patrick was and why he's important and why that holiday is not about its co-opted features, unfortunately, which are leprechauns, gold, and drunkenness.
Green beer.
That's right. But he was a real gift to not only the church, but to the Western tradition, Western culture, and really preserved a lot of our Western thought because of his work in Ireland. So without further ado, Father Spencer, give us a little primer on St. Patrick and why he's someone that we should all know about and care about.
Well, there's so many reasons why Patrick has lived on as a figure, but there's so many parts of his story that are not known. And so I do enjoy talking about him because every time I unpack his story with people, I realize how little the true life of Patrick is.
That's right.
Is known, and how much it's just become a cultural moment for, fun or debauchery.
Oh, yes. Well, and a funny aside on this. So one of the way that I came to know St. Patrick originally as a newbie to the Anglican way was through the Lyrica and through St. Patrick's breastplate, which we sing for every baptism.
Right.
And when we were singing it, I was reminded of a professor that I had in my dispensational Bible college who quoted it, the Christ within me, Christ around me, that whole piece, but gave no attribution to St. Patrick because he was, a Catholic and an Anglican. And so I thought this was just something that this guy had come up with. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
What a great prayer.
I know. Anyway, so with all that aside.
Yeah, you got to cite your sources, right?
That's right.
Always. So Patrick is a big deal for all Christians. Comes from that era of the undivided church very early on. Mm-hmm. So he's living in the 300s. But what often goes unsaid is that he was an early English Christian or British Christian, literally among the Britons in early England. And, everyone associates him with Ireland. He was not a native-born Irish guy. He was a Brit kid who grew up as a Christian.
So Patrick is really a British name.
It is.
An English name.
Absolutely. It's not a British name. And, think of, there's Patroclus.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And I'm thinking of Homer there, and that's Greek. But so if you can tie it from Greek to Rome, and then there was a Latin presence in Britain because of Julius Caesar.
Yep.
Anyway, so there's Christians in England. We don't even know when the first Christians got to England. That's shrouded in mystery and intrigue, and I'm fascinated, and I'm very excited to get to heaven and ask these questions to the Lord. But somehow Christians got established in England. Some people might say, well, a few Roman soldiers who had heard the gospel were in England and they shared it with their friends, and some locals got it too. But it's beyond that. It's beyond that because, and Patrick is a fantastic piece of evidence because his grandfather was a priest in the ancient English church.
And he was sent back as a bishop, right? As a missionary bishop.
He was later. You're going to have the story.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But just the
so his grandfather is a priest
connection
in the church. His dad's a deacon. He's raised in a Christian home. He doesn't take it very seriously as he's growing up. But in the midst of his early teen years, he's actually kidnapped by Irish bandits, Irish pirates. And what they would do is they would go on raids.
Some wild rovers, if you will.
Into England, exactly. They'd go into Britain and they would kidnap people, right? Take them away. Carry him into slavery. That's what they did to him. They carried him away back to Ireland, take him up into the Highlands, and he is, put into labor as a sheep herder, right? Shepherd. And so he's watching these sheep in the Irish hillside for years. And during that time, suddenly he kind of discovers the significance of his Christian faith, and his prayer life with God is just set on fire. And so he spends all of his time in the hillsides praying. The Holy Spirit does a lot of great work in his heart. A few years into his enslavement, he starts having visions from God, basically laying a chart for him to get back home, right? And of course, this is very dangerous because if you're caught as a runaway slave, you're killed. Right. So many incentives to not run away. But he, on a leap of faith, he trusts the visions, which include tracking the stars and being able to track his way back eastward. And he has to go the long way across Ireland to get back to the coast on that side of Ireland. And once he's there, he finds smugglers and he has to talk them into letting him on their boat and taking him back to England. And that's a whole funny story in of itself, because at first they say no. The story says he dropped to his knees and prayed, and then they changed their mind. So he's allowed onto this smuggling boat, gets back to Britain, makes it back home to his family. Everybody's happy. Mm-hmm. And that could have been the end of the story, right? But it's not, because he devotes his life to God, goes to seminary, becomes a monk, and he's serving the Lord faithfully. He received a lot of his education in France. So later on in his life, he's in France in a monastery, and he has another vision. And it's very much like Paul's Macedonian vision, right? So this is a great part of the scriptures where Paul has a dream of a Macedonian man crying out to him and saying, please bring us the gospel of Jesus Christ, right? And that leads to one of Paul's missionary journeys to Macedonia. Same thing happens with Patrick, but it's an Irishman who appears to him in his vision and says, please return and bring us Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? And he prays about this, and of course he doesn't want to at first, and there's danger for him to go back. There's also just overcoming the bitterness in his heart towards those who had kidnapped and enslaved him. But he prays about it. He's convinced that he needs to go. And he talks to the English bishops, and he says, will you commission me to go out there? They say yes. And so he's sent out by the English church as a missionary bishop to Ireland. Mm-hmm. And as soon as he lands, he immediately has this confrontation with one of the local kings, chieftains. And everybody knows, we should kill this guy.
Yeah.
But he's got this interesting tale about this unknown God. And, the story unfolds from there. And there's countless myths and legends about the miracles that he performs, right? Mm-hmm. To basically confirm his legitimacy, right? Or the Holy Spirit's confirming the legitimacy of his message to the Irish peoples. But it starts with the conversion of that local king. And from that point on, Ireland is just swept with the gospel through the work of Patrick and those who hear his call. And so he also develops what's called or he plays a large part in developing the Celtic model of evangelism in Ireland, which is it's distinct. It's very helpful for us as we think about mission and evangelism today in terms of building an enclave as a community of Christians, but one that's not walled off and isolated from the world, but one that's very much present and active in the midst of a society of non-Christians, right? And so being present and close by in an incarnational way, but also being distinct enough to maintain the authenticity of the gospel and their message and what makes them different from the world that surrounds them. And so one of the images of this is, these Celtic early church enclaves would look like, a church with like a low wall around it, and not really a wall even, almost more like benches, right? But it would also it would be like a little bit of a wall, enough to demarcate, like you're entering into something different, but there were many gaps in the wall. So people had a clear sense of there's many openings.
Right.
It's easy to get in. In fact, they're inviting me in, but I'm entering into something that is different from this world.
Yeah. Almost sounds like a healthy church. I mean,
it's exactly the way church should be, right? The doors are open, but you know that you're leaving this world and entering the kingdom when you get in.
And it's interesting to compare that to Rod Dreher, when he wrote a few years ago. I'm trying to remember which order he had put himself in. Do you remember the one where everybody said he was just trying to pull out of culture, and he's like, no, what was that one? What was that book called?
Benedict
Doctrine. That's right. And the Benedictine style monastery is composed as opposed to that, right? And in his book, he makes the claim, and rightfully so, that the Benedictines were also very helpful in preserving that Western library and that Western culture and society model as well, primarily through education, right?
Absolutely. Preserving being the key word.
Yeah. And it's almost two sides to the same coin, right? There's a preservation, but there's also an active work that has to be done in the world around us.
Yeah. Are you retreating? Are you escaping? These can be nuanced, distinctions. At the end of the day, what you have to be able to do effectively is preserve that which has been handed down to you, that which we have received, through the generations of the saints and from Christ himself, as Paul says. Can you maintain that, preserve it, and also cast it forward into the world?
Mm-hmm.
It's just so helpful. A foundational piece for a theology of mission is remembering, a bit of sacramentology, actually. Like God's gifts and the work of his Spirit in the world is always meant to be passed on, right? So the gifts that you and I have received from God, we've received so that we can pass those things on into the world. A helpful metaphor is like, God's gifts and the work of the Holy Spirit, it doesn't create cul-de-sacs,
right?
It creates new highways and byways. Yep. It doesn't create ponds, it creates rivers. And so that's why God's gifts always come with that missional imperative as well, baked into it. You've received this, now go and pass it on. And do so in the way that St. Paul did, where he said, I am but a humble beggar, right? A starving beggar who found bread.
Right.
And now I'm here to tell the rest of you beggars where the bread's at.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Jack Wyrtzen from Word of Life used to say that I'm just a beggar telling other beggars where to find the bread.
The bread of life, exactly.
Yep. I think another interesting piece of the lore here with St. Patrick is the idea that he drove the snakes out of Ireland.
That's one of the myths, yes.
And what it would tell us, so I for the record, because I want to sound smart, I know what the snakes represent, but could you please tell the rest trying to submit my Anglican...
No, tell us,
Bryce.
Put
a few days here. Well, okay, so the snakes represented the Druids, which were the Satanists, right? Am I getting that story correct?
That's a great, more naturalistic reading on it.
Yeah. And so because he was evangelizing and basically drove the Druids out of Ireland, that's where the imagery of the snakes comes from.
There's a lot of mystery there as well about like what happened to the Druids.
Yeah.
Because they were the big dogs in town, until Patrick and Christianity shows up. And then the Druids just kind of disappear from the scene. And there's some, wondering over how much of this was them folding in to the Christian church. And like the Celtic cross is almost as a picture of a type of synthesis, and synthesis is generally, in the sense of syncretism, is viewed negatively. But the Celtic cross with the cross and the circle binding the arms together, I find it to be a wonderful image of the Trinity, actually, right? And, the presence of Christ, the Son, sent from the Father, bound together by the love of the Holy Spirit.
Right.
Anyway, there's different ways to interpret a piece of art and whatnot. But, the circle is definitely something that the Druids would have pointed to as like a symbol of their beliefs, right? And like the oneness of nature and Celtic pagan spirituality. Anyway, we don't know. There's so much confusion when it comes to the early English history and the early English church's history because of those pesky Vikings that kept coming in for, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years after this, just wave after wave after wave of Viking invasions. And they would always kick butt when they got there.
Well, sure. I mean, they're
and
fighting
they
monks.
Would dominate.
Yeah.
And they would do their best to eliminate Christianity, right? And de-Christianize the English people, which is why the English days of the week still have the names of the Norse gods baked into them. But we've kept it that way, even though Christianity's won in the long run, not because we forgot or didn't get around to fixing that, but like this is how we mock the Vikings, right?
Right. Yeah, and many of the Vikings...
and their attempts to de-Christianize English-speaking people.
And the Vikings themselves became Christianized later on.
They
these
became
efforts.
converted within a couple centuries. And that's why you have, the cycle of Viking invasion. The Christians run up into the hills of Wales and hide out. And then eventually they come out and begin converting the Vikings, who have become farmers and more domesticated by that point. And pretty soon they're all Christian again.
It's wonderful.
That's also encouraging for us to remember, as it looks like, the West is becoming more post-Christian and Christianity is dying. Like Christianity has always looked like it's dying at some point around the world.
Oh, yeah.
And look who's still here and still who has the last laugh. It's always Jesus, right? So, yeah, you can't kill the God that rose from the dead.
That's right. That's right. And I think St. Patrick's Day is a great example of a holiday that the pagans have tried to take from us, just like Easter and now Christmas as well. A lot of folks, when there are a lot of folks who talk about, should we celebrate holidays because of their potential pagan beginnings, such as Christmas and Easter and and they're saying that, kind of like you said with the Druids, that we just kind of folded those pagan holidays and rituals into our liturgy and into our church calendar. And that's just not true, right?
Well, what's the difference between a sinner repenting and coming to faith and converting to the church, right? Versus, this other narrative of there was a bad guy with bad ideas and he became a Christian and now he's poisoned the Christian pool.
Right.
So let's not forget the whole point is to reclaim the nations and make disciples of all nations and bring in the lost and the sinners. The only thing you have to do as you're doing that is preserve the authentic gospel, right? The true gospel, which you started off with. And that's where the beauty of Christianity is, like a very well documented religion. None of this stuff is really, like all of the conspiracy theories, like somewhere along the line, the real faith was lost. And it's like, well, let's not pretend that these guys weren't writing everything down at every step of the way and copying down that which was written hundreds and thousands of times. And we still have so much of that evidence to demonstrate how well the faith has been preserved at every step of the way.
Right. Yeah. Talk about the preservation a little bit of Patrick and what he brought to the table with that, the ideas that he helped preserve, kind of that Western thought, Western culture in certain ways.
Well, there's a great book called How the Irish Saved Civilization. And the premise of it is, well, I guess Patrick plays a big part in the story because Patrick makes Ireland Christian, right? And
Without
he's not the
basis.
only guy. There's so many other great saints that joined him in this work or came along a little after him. But what ends up happening by the 5th century is the collapse of the Roman Empire, right? And as Rome collapses and Rome is pillaged by the Gothic hordes, you see Rome contract its power, right? And so they're pulling their garrisons back from Britain and from Gaul and around the world. And as their power shrinks, their footprint contracts, and this kind of leaves Britain floating out in the wind,
right?
Which is what makes them vulnerable to the Saxons and the Angles that come in later on. When this happens, and you see kind of, and this is where the beginning of that sense of like the Dark Age begins, and a lot of people with a high view of Western history, they don't like that idea that at some point everything descended into darkness and chaos. But the grain of truth behind it is that the Roman Empire's widespread ability to uphold a sense of rule of law throughout the empire, right, that died. And so there's absolutely a sense of chaos in the larger sense as it kind of becomes feudalism and localism, and hopefully you have a strong local lord with a strong castle, and because like when these bands of marauders sweep through, the Roman legions aren't going to show up.
That's right.
To help, so you're kind of on your own, and that's where you see pockets of holdouts and strongholds, right? Both against the marauding hordes, that's sweeping the west, but also preserving civilization and these bits of, art and Christian literature and the scriptures.
Right.
As well as that, that sense of Roman jurisprudence and the rule of law, that whole classic concept. But everyone on the continent is really taking a beating. Right. And then even the Brits get, thoroughly dominated by the Vikings. And at a certain point, it looks pretty bleak. And it looks like all these pockets and holdouts are just being swallowed up. But who's still remaining? It's those Christians out in Ireland. Those
pesky Christians.
Right?
Yeah.
The monks in Ireland remain kind of one of these few places that remain untouched. It's hard to get there. Right. For one thing. Rome never made it as far as Ireland or Scotland. And so you see the Celtic Church play a crucial role in the history of things in the wake of the collapse of the Roman Empire. The Celtic Church and these monasteries are in a position to send out missionaries and gospel witnesses to re-evangelize the continent and Europe. And they do that. And that's where like St. Columba, and among others, this is their role in European Christianity. And, that's only possible because of what Patrick had done in forging out into pagan Ireland to establish it as the frontier of Christianity in his time. But shortly thereafter, it would become like the holdout and the beacon of Christian light back into the continent.
That's right. And I think it's interesting that you talk about the Roman Empire and how it has helped the spread of Christianity early on, right? I mean, we even see that in the New Testament with Paul, right? Paul uses his Roman citizenship and makes an appeal to Rome to have the government basically take him to a place that he has wanted to go and visit and evangelize, and had yet had the opportunity to. I think, this conversation doesn't always have to be blended with Christian nationalism, right? Because Rome was not considered a Christian nation.
They got there.
They did for a very short time.
After they spent hundreds of years trying to kill all the Christians.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it was a short time within the history of Rome, and it wasn't necessarily, even though it was Christian in name, I would argue that it probably wasn't as Christian in practice, right?
Right. And with all things, if you're evaluating different systems and competing ideologies, you're always asking the question implicitly, like, well, compared to what?
That's right.
You like this thing compared to what?
Compared to what?
Do I like the idea of a Christian Roman Empire? I like that better than the idea of a pagan Roman Empire that's actively persecuting Christians.
That's right. Totally agree. And I think when we look at, how this kind of transitions into the modern nation state, and how do we act as a country, and how do we we talked a lot about this in season 2 about the role of the church, the role of the government, and the role of the family, and how those three interact with each other. And in modern history, we really haven't had until the United States, we either had secular governments or Christian governments, and there really wasn't anybody in between, right? The French Revolution was wholly secular, was an absolute bloodbath, and you can compare that to the Christian monarchy that we had in England as kind of a two sides of the different coin. And then the United States comes along, and we would both argue that we had a Christian founding, but our government was not explicitly Christian in the way that it was created, right? There was a separation of state from the church, so that the state didn't dictate to the church what it could teach, what it couldn't teach. It couldn't impose a specific denomination on its people. But there was a firm understanding that we as a nation were built on these Christian principles. And even de Tocqueville, when he came here, said these Christian principles are the reason this country continues to succeed and prosper. And if it ever loses that, then it will have a lot of problems, which we see today. And so I think when we look at, how is our government supposed to function, I think providing a strong nation state that has a high deterrence value to bad actors and has a strong olive branch in the other hand, right? A strong sword in one hand for deterrence, a strong olive branch in the other for bridging peace and bridging gaps.
And now you're describing the national seal.
That's right. Yeah. Absolutely. And you allow Americans to go out and to be favored in these other countries as an opportunity for the church. The church has to take advantage of that opportunity to send missionaries as well, right? This whole thing kind of comes full circle. So why is it important that we just deposed a dictator in Venezuela? Because it's bad for dictators to exist, and it's bad for them to exist in our hemisphere and in our region of space, our sphere of influence as a country, right? Why are we bombing a horrific theocracy in Iran back into the Stone Age? Because it's bad for them to exist, right? They are actively persecuting and killing.
It's not even just a procedural thing.
That's right.
Or it's a
right role of the government.
And I think this is where hopefully I wish we'd spoke about things in a way that appealed to the common ground, which I really believe. Like more issues than we suspect are 80-20 issues.
That's right.
Right? And there's a lot of common ground to be found in just
among the average
being
people.
Reminded.
Right. Among normal people.
We're talking about this thing, and maybe we're talking about it very passionately, whatever the thing is, because we believe that justice is real and justice matters. Mm-hmm. And if I could kind of revisit the way you were describing the development of history, maybe a slightly different way to put it is today we think of the options as secularism or some kind of theocracy. Throughout history, like secularism was not an option.
Oh, that's right. Secularism is also a religion in and of itself, right? It's not just this warm and fuzzy middle ground where there's no imposition of moral values, right?
Right. And the reason why it wasn't an option is because it's not a real option today.
No,
it's a fake
totally
option.
Yeah.
People have always understood if the government's going to be doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose the danger and Plato talks about this, right, in the Republic, but there's a difference between a king and a tyrant.
Yes.
And if you're only thinking about this through like the American Democratic Republican lens of, either you have a representative republic or you have one guy in charge and that's automatically tyrant. And Plato's like, no, let's be fair.
Right.
The real standard that you measure government by is is it upholding justice or not?
Right.
So based on that standard, you could have a monarchy with one guy in charge, and maybe he does a fantastic job upholding justice. We call him a king, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good versus bad delineation, not necessarily a specific type of government delineation.
Right. It's like you could have many different types of systems. It normally comes down to how the systems are wielded.
That's right.
And if they're wielded well, then you have justice. Well, then what are we complaining about? And if they're not wielded well, then you nobody's gonna be happy for long. So, a good king is a king. A bad king is a tyrant or a dictator. And Plato made that distinction a long, long time ago. I think most people would agree, like a good king is good because he's upholding justice. Justice is a moral concept, right?
That's right.
And maybe you have a different religion, than the next guy. But you're making moral judgments as you try to discern what is just and wise to do. Whether you're Solomon in the Old Testament, trying to figure out, but two women come to me and they both say that this is their baby, right? How do you figure out what justice looks like?
That's right.
And how to affect justice on the situation. That's always the question for governments. Governments that lose sight of justice as the goal and that moral aspect of why they have power in the first place, what do they descend into?
Right.
It's self-rule. It's I'm doing what I want to do because if I have power, I'm going to use it to benefit myself. That's not a moral approach to law.
Right.
Right. And the worst thing that modern people can do is they think that they're advancing justice by getting morality out of the conversation. It's like, well, if you take morals out of it, what's left?
That's right. Well,
all that's left is personal power agendas.
Yeah.
And all these petty little subplots of like this group seeking their own special interests. Nobody thinks that that's what justice looks like.
That's right.
And all that creates is division and political warfare endlessly.
Absolutely. I think a great popular culture example of this would be we've removed Good King Wenceslas and we've replaced him with Last Christmas. And we've gotten rid of the moral catechism that comes from that. And we've gotten whammed.
Great carol references.
Yeah. Yes. And, we think it's just, I think it's crazy how much of these good moral forming traditions that we have lost in the last now 70 years, right? I think it's just, it's an absolute shame. And it happened so, quote, innocently, right? It happened through the idea of freedom and, unburdening ourselves from what has been. And it's just, it puts you in this quagmire that everyone hates, right?
Yes. By failing to plan, you plan to fail. What is your society actively oriented towards building?
Right.
And if the answer is nothing really, well, what are you going to get in 100 years?
Because you're either building or
nothing.
You're either building or you're tearing down, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the secular moralistic divide, right? There is no such thing as secularism that is just this warm and fuzzy, warmth of the collective, right? It's you are actively tearing down everything else so that you can have something that is a fiat in nature, right? Something that doesn't actually exist.
Yeah. So back to your point about the founding fathers and how they thought about this. They definitely were not saying, well, I'm a member of this denomination and we really should write our bylaws into this federal constitution that we're writing. No, what they were trying to do was construct a system of government that is more inclined to actually achieve justice by taking into consideration man's fallenness, a very biblical concept, taking into consideration the reality of sin and evil, the need to have a government in order to uphold justice, especially for the weak and the helpless. And all of this doesn't happen automatically or by default. And it doesn't even happen just because you put one guy in charge and gave him all the power. And so the genius of the American federalistic approach and the constitutional system is you create a bunch of different roles that approach the same problem in a variety of ways, and hopefully they can weigh against each other in such a way that they each find complementarity, right? In pursuing a common goal, justice, on the best days.
Sure.
On their worst days, they each check one another
Mm-hmm.
and prevent each other from devolving from the pursuit of justice into the pursuit of my own special interest.
That's right. And we've seen that. I think Woodrow Wilson really set us on the path for that and created the vast majority of the dysfunction that we see in Washington today, because he was the president that got the constitutional amendment that created the direct election of senators passed, right? So senators used to be elected by your state house of representatives. They would pick 2 people to go and represent their state, your state, in D.C. in the Senate, and the House of Representatives was meant to represent the people, right? And Woodrow Wilson also locked the members of the Senate or members of the House at 433, right? And so there's, at that point in time, the population of the United States was 30 million. We're over 300 million today, right? So the amount of people that your congressman represents has increased tenfold. And so they're now more disconnected from the people than they've ever been.
And the anonymity of
that's right.
Congress.
Yeah, you don't know. Unless you run in those circles, which is a very few people, you don't see your congressman at church. You don't see your congressman at the grocery store. You don't see your congressman's kids in your kids' school, right? You have this
hard to just walk into his office.
Impossible.
Get his time.
Absolutely impossible. And then on the Senate side, we had a body that was there to represent the state, and now, as soon as that happened, they were controlled by political parties, and they're still controlled by political parties, right? Yeah. And so we just have this party divide, which is why you can't get stuff like the SAVE Act done, right? The Save America Act, 80-20 issue, right? 80% of Americans, not 80% of Republicans, 80% of Americans, Democrats included, believe that you should have a voter ID to vote, right? Simple, basic stuff, and we can't get it done because the Senate lacks a backbone and are unwilling to say, yeah, it may take us 6 weeks with a talking filibuster, but it's worth it to have this done. So we're going to take 6 weeks and do this.
Yeah. And I think that, the 80%, the reason why there's common ground on that across the spectrum is because people, and this speaks well to our whole system, people understand the significance of their vote.
That's right.
And they also understand what's going to undermine the significance of every person's vote.
Yes.
And the easiest way to undermine the significance of the vote is to not safeguard who all is allowed into the voting pool.
Right. 100%. Right. Yeah. Kristi Noem, for all her faults, right? She got reassigned recently. In the Senate testimony that she was giving before she got reassigned, I think it was Chris Coons, was a Democrat from Delaware, Connecticut, somewhere up there in New England. Coons was saying that, he said, would you have ICE agents can you tell us today that you want to have ICE agents in the polling booth and polling locations in November? And she said, there's no plan to have ICE agents in the election offices and polling locations in November. And he said, well, can you assure me that there will be no ICE agents there? And she said, are you planning on having illegals vote? Like, why would we need to have ICE? Why is this a big deal to you? Right. And it's just, why do you have these vast open borders under Biden and under Obama? Because we believe in birthright citizenship currently, right? That's kind of the general understanding.
Yeah.
And if you believe in birthright citizenship, then the more people you can get here to have kids, then you are now expanding your voting pool. And also, we don't even make that distinction when it comes to the census, and we reorient congressional seats based off the census. Right. So we count illegal immigrants as a part of the census.
We do.
And so if California has 5 million more, 50 million more people than, say, Texas, because they have all of these illegal immigrants, then they're going to get more representation in Congress than Texas is going to get. Right.
And that's just, it breaks the system. Like, that's not the way
but gerrymandering is bad.
Meant to run.
But gerrymandering is bad, but we can.
Right. And having a second tier of citizenry, right? Like having millions of people in your society living in the shadows.
It's terrible for them, not for us,
produce
for
anything good across the board.
That's right.
And I understand why people want to come here. And my grandmother was an immigrant, and I grew up with all the great immigrant stories. And most Americans are descendants of immigrants, right?
Yeah.
All of us, I guess you could say.
Sure.
At some point or another.
At some point.
Everybody.
Yeah.
People chose to come to this country. What matters, and this goes back to like who do you want in the voting pool? Well, if the whole point of this American dream is that you want a representative form of government, well, then you have to be really specific about who is being represented.
That's right.
And it needs to be the people who are here and are actively choosing to buy into this thing called America, which is still relatively new, right?
Right.
And the people who came here and chose, I want to be an American, like that's what this country's all about. There's a lot of people that only think of America as a place for economic opportunity. I'm going to go there and make a few bucks. That's
Sure.
fine. I get it. You get a visa, you come to the country, you work here. That's fine. But it makes a lot of sense to guard the vote
Yes,
to the people
that's right.
that love this country, plan to spend the rest of their lives here, want to build their families here, want to leave a better country behind for their children. And obviously there's a lot of people that probably are not eligible to vote today that don't meet that do want those things. They want those good things. They want their kids to grow up here and their grandkids. Well, that's why we have a legal system.
Yes. For
assimilating into society, becoming a lawful member of the voting body, and all of those systems are provided for. There's a right way to go about it.
That's right.
That there's really no benefit to shortcutting the due process.
100%.
And when you try to undermine the due process, the only thing you do is you undermine the significance of the vote for everybody. And this is why there's so many other people that just don't vote. They don't see the point. They don't think it's worth their time. They don't think their vote is worth very much.
Yeah.
And most Americans don't vote on election day.
Right.
Which is tragic.
That's very sad. It's very sad. I think there's another piece of this too that's important to remember is the illegal immigration is bad not just for people here, right? It's not just bad that folks come here and are working jobs that other people that are citizens could want to work. There's inflation in your monetary system. There's inflation in your housing system. There's strain on your public services. There's a lot of negative effects for the country that is being affected. But it's also bad for the people who come here illegally themselves, right? I lived in Mexico for a short time. I had a conversation with a gentleman in my church there, and he had been an illegal immigrant in Los Angeles back in the 90s. And he was there, I think he said for 6 or 7 years, 6. And he was very, very passionate about the fact that it was bad for him. It was bad for his soul. And he was more negatively affected by it than he ever imagined that he would be. Simply from having to consistently worry about being found out to being taken advantage of on his wages. He still made vastly more money here than he would have been making in Mexico. He sent a lot of money back home. But he was the one that really impressed on me. This is not just bad for you. It is bad for us who come there illegally as well. And it is a under the table, underhanded, soul killing.
It is a life of fear. And
right.
My heart goes out to that community that lives in the shadows.
Yeah.
For that reason, if nothing else. But then on top of that, in order to get here, you have to hand your life savings over to a coyote.
That's right.
And that money goes straight to the cartels. And it gets mixed in with all this human trafficking and drug smuggling
100%.
That's going on. And just death and destruction everywhere you look, for the simple reason that the law that currently exists on the book is not being upheld. This is why you have governments. Again,
right.
Uphold the law. If the law is bad, if justice is not being done, change the law.
Yeah.
But governments don't get to simply decide which special interests they're going to honor today.
That's right.
There's nothing noble or duty oriented about that.
That's right. And I think that's been one of the biggest changes since Trump's second administration, especially compared to the Biden administration. I mean, we had net negative migration for the first time in 40 years last year. Right. That's insane because we are enforcing the laws that are on the books. Right. Because we have secured our border. Now, is there still drugs that find its way over? Yes. Is there but not, border crossings are down. These are insanely low numbers compared to the previous 4 years under Joe Biden. I think this
so
also
much of the conversation before now has been under the illusion that that's impossible.
That's right. Absolutely.
It's just, you couldn't stop it even if you try. It's no, that's actually
right. You can.
You kind of get the world that you're willing to tolerate.
100%.
If you want to change things, just go do it.
Yeah.
At least try.
And everybody wants to, not everybody. A lot of folks on the left want to take this back to a human rights issue, right? And if you come from a poor country and you're disadvantaged or you're being persecuted, then you have a right to come here in whatever form or fashion you can. And you miss the forest through the trees, right? This is a system that preyed on the weak, that preyed on the poor, the desperate. Absolutely. And if you don't have a right view of human dignity, then this makes sense, right? Because you miss the forest through the trees. It's the same thing with prostitution or surrogacy or abortion, right? These are all things that absolutely just take advantage of so many people that may come into this with a not their blinders on, but just an overly optimistic mindset of this is going to be great and I'm going to make this money and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And it's just so contrary to the idea of human flourishing, because process still matters, right? Because how you do things makes a difference.
Yes. And the other aspect of our immigration policy that we never think about, we want to give ourselves credit for being a place for desperate people to come to, knowing that those people so often get taken advantage of and abused. They get abused on the way over here.
Yep.
They get abused when they're here, when their wages could be docked or their jobs could be taken from them, and they have zero recourse to any kind of protection or help.
That's right.
So if you really want justice to be done, everybody needs to step into the light.
That's right. 100%.
And we need to have a one-tier system, right? Like if you're here, you're here.
Right.
It's not like half of us are hiding and pretending we're not here.
Yeah.
That doesn't produce justice for anybody.
Yeah.
And I hate the aspect to which this can and often does become just a modern version of slavery.
Yeah.
Which is relevant to the St. Patrick conversation.
Absolutely.
Because like slavery is so endemic to human history and the human impulse to take advantage of your neighbor.
Yeah.
A moral, just society.
Wait a second. But everybody in Ireland was white. You mean to tell me that white people enslave white people? No. That's not how this works.
We're all good at hurting people. We're all really good at it. And if we want to actually say this is a nation built on law, and real law is a reflection of something that is actually just.
Yes.
Not according to me and my interests, but something that actually is just in the eyes of God. And government has no business exercising any other kind of law. Yes. Or any kind of power that's in contradiction to justice. This is basic American thought, American political thought, going back to the Declaration, the Constitution, and most of our great political thinkers and reformers have always appealed to this basic concept. Like our law is meant to be a reflection of what is true,
right,
with a capital T. And so whether you want to call that Christian nationalism or the thought of the founding, whatever. Like we're talking about something that we believe is actually true and deeply moral in the pursuit of justice with a capital J.
Yeah.
You don't get to have that in a philosophically coherent and honest way. If you like you're going to pretend we're doing this in a morally free, morally neutral way.
Absolutely. And I think you go back to Abolition of Man, right, in C.S. Lewis, and specifically his essay on education, and how our education system has so twisted these ideas of truth, and this was happening back in his day, right? Like this is nothing new. And I was having a conversation the other day with a group of friends, and we were talking about school choice, and it was in a semi-public coffee area. And a lady came over and brought a coworker of hers with her, and she's an educator high up in the state, and both of them are. And we talked about school choice and why that was so important to give parents options for their children, especially in underperforming schools, but in every school that right still exists and remains. And at the end of it, the one of the lady goes, I appreciate you sharing your truth and how you've come to that, and you've come to an understanding of that truth that I just haven't come to yet. And I'm like, to quote my grandfather, it's just absolute horse hockey. like this double speak is insane. There's a fellow that I'm helping run for Congress. His name's John Cowan, and he's from originally from Bartow County in the Cartersville area. And his mother was an educator and a school administrator. But she was an educator and a school administrator back when we actually educated students, right? America has always been on the right side, on the politically right side of the curve, right? Britain started going much more liberal than the United States did at an earlier period of time. And we have, by conservation, we have maintained a lot of those higher standards when it comes to education. Because what's an education for? It's not just so you can go get a job. It's so that you can understand what is going on in the world, right? So that you can understand if your County commission says, hey, we're raising your tax. Your tax bill has gone up, but we've cut your millage rate. Well, no, you've actually raised my taxes because I'm actually still paying more money, right? Like, it's to have an informed citizenry that can understand how to vote, that can understand these things. Now, is everybody going to understand at first glance some, foreign policy deal with China? No, but you can get there, right? Like, you have the ability to learn and to understand, like, these things are not, these are not overly complicated where, you have to have an IQ of 150 or more to understand them, right?
It does require more time and investment.
Correct.
You also already have senators.
Yes. But you should know enough to hold these people accountable, right? And that was the idea behind an American education system, was not so you could get employment. It was so that you could hold your elected representatives accountable. And we've just lost that. And I think until we regain a lot of that ground in our education system, this is going to continue to be an uphill battle for a very, very long time.
Yeah. Agreed.
Well, we've talked about a lot. We've gone down some fun.
Well, you reminded me of an article
Yeah.
that is in my latest issue of First Things that I look forward to reading, but it was making the case for bringing prayer back to schools.
Mm.
And I just think it goes along with the point you just made. We made a grave mistake when we made that court ruling in the 60s to take prayer out of school.
Because we believe secularism was this warm, fuzzy, nowhere space.
We were willing to get duped into the notion for a minute there that morals are optional in a society that's devoted to upholding justice.
And that they can be found elsewhere.
And
right?
Human rights for all. Like we're dealing with inherently moral concepts. Why are we pretending that we're not?
Well, I think we also have the misunderstanding that the vast majority of culture believes that people are born good, right? And that everybody is basically good. And so when we see this evil happening, like the shooting that happened at the VA clinic in Jasper, they're like, well, that evil is someone else over there. Solzhenitsyn talked about this, right? He said, if only somewhere we can round up all of the bad people and put them in jail.
Well, that's what Stalin was working on.
Exactly. But Solzhenitsyn comes back and says the line of good and evil runs directly down the human heart.
Yeah.
And no one is born good. And only Christianity teaches that there is no one good. No, not one.
You have the Marxist solution, which is it can't be our fault because we're all basically good.
Right.
It must be those other people, whoever that group is. Let's round them up, eliminate them, then we'll all be living in utopia.
Correct.
And then the Christ-like response, and what we're shown in the example of Jesus, is actually the road to life begins with choosing grace and forgiveness and charity and putting your own life on the line in pursuit of those things.
And understanding your own sin, right? What is the first call? The first call is to repentance, right?
Yes.
Realize that you were broken and in need of a savior and that you can't do this, right?
So reject the pride and the hubris of saying, we're fine.
That's right.
We're good all the time.
Well, I mean, we have to unhitch ourselves from that pesky Old Testament that laid out the law, and that Paul says, what did Paul say about the law? Oh, we don't need it. It's whatever. No, like not at all. The law is there to tell you. The law is there to tell you that you need a savior, to tell you that you cannot measure up, regardless of what you do.
And this is why in our liturgy every Sunday we have a statement of the law, whether abbreviated or once a month we'll say the whole Decalogue, all 10 commandments. And the reason being, like liturgically, the function of that is when you hear the law, the only correct response is, oh, woe is me,
That's
a sinner.
Right. Absolutely.
Because I do not live up to this perfectly.
Yes.
And therefore I am dependent on the grace of God.
Mm-hmm.
And that gift, which I have received from him, I am called to pass forward.
Yes. 100%. And then, we could keep going on this forever. It's just, the insanity of culture has been on full display for a long time. And I'm hopeful that we are starting to see a shift back to some sense of normalcy. I think the transgender stuff specifically has been a run too far, too fast for the left. And even these minor attracted persons, as they like to call them. I mean, there is a cultural backlash to some of this, and I think that is the death pains of Christianity in a cultural Christianity finally saying this is a bridge too far.
Well, I look at it through the lens of you can run as far as you want with that rationale of, this is all about America's merely a project in maximizing personal autonomy.
Right.
And I should be able to do what I want. But at a certain point, you have to deal with, again, it's not about the procedure
Mhm.
or the process that you've put in place. Back to the king tyrant distinction. Like, it's not just about where the power is, it's about how the power is used.
Correct.
So even in a society, if you had maximal autonomy, like this is the libertarian dream,
Mhm.
you create a libertarian utopia, everybody can do whatever they want.
Right.
Well, maybe all the people there are actually morally good and righteous,
Yes.
and they use that power well, and great. Then we won't have anything to complain about. Or you see human nature kick in and you realize people are really good at using and abusing one another.
Absolutely. I don't remember if it was Coulson quoting Lewis or if it was actually a Coulson quote, but Coulson said that if you don't have a moral law binding on the hearts of the people, then you can never have enough policemen, right? Because that moral law is a policeman, is an individual policeman in the conscience of every person. He said
that's what your conscience should be.
It
should be restraining you.
Yeah, but he goes on to say that, today the worst advice you can give anyone is Jiminy Cricket's "Let your conscience be your guide," right? Because the conscience, humans. He also said humans have the infinite capacity for self-rationalization.
That's the one,
right?
Yep.
And we,
and we all know that's true.
We do, but we also
that's every man's struggle.
We misunderstand. We have purposely misunderstood the idea of freedom as the ability to do what you want, as opposed to the responsibility to do what you ought, right?
But, and to finish my thought there, the people that want to pretend that this is merely about seeking autonomy, and it really doesn't matter how you use that autonomy or that power. Like, eventually you will find yourself spending your life running headlong into a brick wall.
Yes.
Because injustice does not lead to life.
Mm-hmm.
When we do not use the power, the freedom that we have, when we do not use it well, it leads to death. It leads to decay and destruction. And not just for ourselves, but everybody who loves us and depends on us, our society, etc. And so, like, justice actually matters.
Yes.
Morality actually matters. These good things cannot become cliches or meaningless isms that we spout out. Like, we have to realize this really matters deeply, and that's why all of the great men and women who came before us, the giants upon whose shoulders we currently stand, they gave their lives for something that is deeply meaningful. And we have received those gifts.
That's right.
And the way we steward those gifts well matters.
And even culturally, right? You can't have a society that just defines what is good, true, and beautiful on its own accord, right? Because that's how you get some of the worst atrocities we've ever seen, like you mentioned earlier with the Russians. But we can also argue this from a natural law perspective and say, if there is a moral law, then there has to be a moral lawgiver, right? And that moral law has to come from a higher place than you and me or whoever is in power at the time.
Yeah, I mean, the moral argument for God is one of Lewis's favorites, one of my favorites. You cannot talk about justice and morality in a real objective sense without a conception of, like, ultimate good.
Right.
And if we try to cut God out of that box and say, like, well, I guess ultimate goodness is just found within, because that's my conscience, that's my soul.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good luck with that one. The reality of the brokenness of the human soul on an individual level, and just the fact that nobody agrees on stuff out here.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Go and try to hash out ultimate goodness and truth with your neighbor.
That's right.
It doesn't work like that because none of us are perfect reflections of that ultimate truth and goodness. But I think we're all aware that it's out there.
That's right.
And there's even a part of us that longs for it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Totally agree with that. Well, as I said, we've covered a lot of ground. We could keep going for quite a while. But we probably should wrap it up for this episode. Really appreciate the time as always.
Appreciate you, Brice.
It's a crisp, cool morning here in Canton, Georgia.
Yeah, enjoying some 38 degrees on the porch.
Spencer over here, I have to describe how he's dressed for you listeners. He has the classic leather boat shoes with strong wool socks underneath.
Oh, my favorite.
Green slacks, a knit sweater, and then
all green.
Of course,
for St. Patrick,
and then just a glorious brown leather jacket on top. And he really puts Pete Buttigieg to shame. I don't know if you've seen the recent pictures of Pete, sitting in the cafeteria. They're trying to remasculinize Pete Buttigieg, and so there's been a feature on him recently. I think it was in Time.
Oh, you're talking about my new beard?
Yes, that's right.
Yes, my Lenten beard.
It is coming in strong, and Pete is trying to compete and just cannot keep up with the picture of manliness that is Father Spencer Amaral today. But with that
means a lot coming from you, Brice. with your fireman hat on and your mustache.
and in shorts, PT shorts, and in a little. I'm pretty disheveled this morning, but that tends to happen many times these days. But anyway, as always, it's a pleasure. Thank you for listening. Please share with your friends. Find us on Facebook, online, and we'll see you soon. Have a great day.
Thanks, Brice.
The Way Forward podcast is a production of Futch Communications, LLC. All of these opinions are mine and Spencer's alone and do not represent anybody else's. We're thankful for your continued listening, but please feel free to reach out to us at info@thewayforwardpodcast.com. Hope to hear from you soon.